not ever to restrain the people, but it was written in detail to restrain the government. And yet today, by ignoring the Constitution, we, the people, are restrained constantly, and the government runs roughshod. There's a lot more secrecy in government than ever before. You don't have true oversight, whether it's domestic policy or foreign policy. At the same time, our privacy is being attacked continuously. This has been especially true since 9/11. Since 9/11, this has been used as an excuse. It's been used as an excuse that because of so much fear drummed up and the fear of another attack, therefore we're told that we have to give up our personal liberties. The Fourth Amendment doesn't mean anything. They're allowed to spy on us. They want a national ID card. They want to know what we're doing financially. Have medical records continuously accumulated in Washington. And this is a continuous process that undermines the very essence of America, because the productivity of America and the great wealth of America came because we have been a free society. We've been fortunate to live in a country that's had the maximum amount of freedom of any country ever, and a constitution that restrained the government more so than anybody else. Yet, essentially in the last 100 years, it's been bad in the last 10, but essentially over the last 100 years there's been a steady erosion. And as the government gets bigger, it undermines the confidence of the people, because it is said now, of course, since 9/11, that you can't be safe in your homes unless the Department of Homeland Security takes care of you. And we all know that the safety of your homes does not depend on the fact that there's a federal officer out there with a gun protecting you. If there's a federal officer out there, either in front of your house or in front of your farm, it's probably there and threatening you. And we now have 100,000 bureaucrats in Washington who carry guns to enforce laws on us. That is a police state. And yet the intent was that we should be kept free and allowed to keep the fruits of our labor. Today we are so less free, and the principle of the income tax has been established now for many years, and I think it's a very, very destructive tax, because it's based on the assumption that the government owns us and they own the fruits of our labor. And therefore they permit us to keep a certain amount under certain conditions. And I argue that even if they allowed you to keep 1 or 2 or 3%, which wouldn't be nearly what they do to us now, it would still be 100% of the principle that is instilled in our minds, that they own us and they own the fruits of our labor. And they literally assume they own our land too, because you know, whether it's domestic or local, city, state, or federal government, we really don't have access to our land unless we get our permits, proper permits. We have devised so many regulations and overtaxes and a monetary system which is so disruptive that our companies now find it much easier to have a business go overseas. And that's why so many of our good jobs are leaving. Not only that, is the taxpayer is required to pay an insurance. If an American company goes overseas and they run into political turmoil and they lose money, they have an insurance company which is called the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. It's not private, it's taxpayer finance, and they bail those companies out. So we literally encourage this globalism where our jobs are going overseas. Now, what I've discovered in my travels, and suspected for a long time, is that the American people are hurting. In spite of the fact that if you listen to our government, they say everything's okay, don't worry about it, because inflation is low. Today it said inflation was 1.9%, and that there's low unemployment rates, and there's great prosperity. On the surface, there's still a lot of prosperity, but there's a lot of debt too. There's a lot of personal debt. There's a lot of people right now losing their houses because they overextended themselves, because they got the false information from the government that interest rates would be low, and people overextended, and now they're losing their homes. And the federal government cannot pay the bills. We tax a lot. There's a limit to how much you can tax. So our government then goes out and borrows. Our national debt is now over $9 trillion, and our entitlement system, that commitment for the future, is up to about $60 trillion. And you know, there's no way this can be paid. Even to run our government on a day-to-day basis requires horrendous borrowing from countries like China and Japan and Saudi Arabia. If they don't want to loan that money back to us, we're done. And each day we have to borrow between $2.5 and $3 billion just to maintain our standard of living. So we live in dangerous times, not only because a war is going on overseas, and there's a war against our liberties here at home in the name of the war on terrorism, but there's a threat of a financial crisis because we have allowed ourselves to be deceived in thinking that the government can provide benefits for all of us from cradle to grave. The Constitution and freedom is based on the assumption that individuals should be left free. They're free because their life is their own. Our lives come from our Creator, and then liberty follows that. And we should be, we should recognize that life and liberty are precious. But then the government should stay out of the way and let us pursue happiness and keep the fruits of our labor. That has long been gone, and now everybody has to have a safety net. And we've lost confidence. We've lost confidence in the American dream. We assume too often, the majority of people in Washington assume that they cannot be reelected unless they come and promise more stuff. I'll give you this, this, and this. And even last week, there were appropriations and passed in the House without any difficulty. Any problem that comes up, they appropriate more money. Children right now, after 37 years of government messing around medical care, there's still a lot of children that need medical care. So they assume, well, there's not enough money. So they appropriate another couple $100 billion for that. A bridge falls down, which was a disaster. Do they stop building bridges in Iraq and start spending that money at home? No, they don't. They just appropriate another $100 billion. The money is not there. So I think we have to, reassess the whole system. We have to decide what kind of government we want. Were we on the right track? Were the founders correct? And if so, what are we going to do about it? I believe sincerely that we were very, very lucky to have the type of men that revolted against the king and wrote the Constitution, and that we have been blessed because of that. Yet today, instead of taking the advice of the founders and having a foreign policy of friendship and trade with all countries that are willing, at the same time not getting involved in their internal affairs and not getting involved in entangling alliances, we're every place. We are literally trying to finance an empire. We have troops now in over 130 countries. And of course, the countries that we know most about is Afghanistan and Iraq and the threat with the Iranians. And these are going badly. They're costing us a lot of money. A lot of men are dying. At the same time, the threats are increased. We went into Iraq on the pretense that they had weapons of mass destruction. They did, and it had something to do with 9/11, which they did. Saudi Arabia, the Saudis, there were 15 of them were Saudis, and they were the ones that actually attacked us. So there were other reasons for going into Iraq, and the consequence has been that there's more Al-Qaeda now than ever before. So we're probably in much greater danger than we were before 9/11, although we haven't been hit. The conditions that we create by being over there are actually getting worse. One of the main reasons they gave for coming over here was the fact that we had troops stationed and bases in Saudi Arabia, and they considered that holy territory. And this aggravated a bit. And we were propping up dictatorships such in Saudi Arabia and other countries. And even by going over there and even doing more, we've actually made our conditions worse. That's why I look to the founders for the advice. In any problem that we have, if we look to it, you'll find out that we violated the Constitution and that we just need to go back to the Constitution. For instance, it's very clear in the Constitution that the power to go to war was not to be left in the executive branch. Only Congress should declare war. We haven't declared a war since World War II. We haven't won one. And we have witnessed a lot of people dying, and our finances have gotten much worse because of it. At the same time, our defense of this country has been diminished. We don't worry about our own borders and worry about everybody else's borders. And it goes on and on. And very simply, if we would insist on the debate of war before we go in, we probably wouldn't have gone in. I tried to insist on that, even brought up a resolution, made a vote on it, and nobody would support that position of debating it before we went in. They transferred the power to the president, and we end up with this.